So over the next half hour, we're going to be chatting about how amazing the double bass is and how amazing all the other instruments are too, obviously. And we're going to, during the 30 minutes, if you have any questions, we'd love to answer them. Of course, double bass related is pretty much at the top of our list of questions we'd love to have from you, but any questions, and we're going to cover some stuff that I think might be really useful for anyone picking up an instrument and learning all the way through to wanting to do it for maybe a career. And we will be focusing on the double bass because that's what we both play, Stuart and I, but we can totally field other instruments too. But first, Stuart, how would you say is the best way to engage people in different types of music, different genres? Go.
Wow, what an intro. Hello, everyone, including the galaxy. So I think, not to get too serious right away, but it's really important to kind of think about how, and be interested to see if you agree with this, Alice, like how being a musician has changed so much and how possibly in the last 20, 30 years being versatile has really come to the fore. And now musicians are asked to take part in so many different types of ensembles and different genres. And especially if you're a freelancer, you can find yourself, in an orchestra one week and then find yourself, doing a wedding gig the next week. And certainly as music has changed and as musicians have had to change, I think the stress, not the stress, what do I mean? Sorry, the emphasis of that has fed down into teaching as well. And I was trying to reflect on myself and thinking about like my teaching. And when I was younger, my teacher very much was a classical bass player. And I was really sort of trained in that classical way. And I went to conservatoire and did, a classical course. But there I was sort of exposed to jazz music and then to folk music, and sort of my interest in that grew quite organically that way. And as I got kind of more experience in that, I was more interested, and that led to that kind of cycle of curiosity that I think is really important and is an important thing to communicate to students as well.
So would you say it snowballed more once you started taking part in jazz bands and Dixieland bands and whatever else?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we kind of unequivocally agree that like exposure to as much as possible is really key for development as a musician. And I know I talked about that in my little live session before the virtual session started, and I know you talked about it as well in Sounds and Styles, this becoming allowing whether you're a parent, exposing your child to lots of different types of music. And that might not necessarily be playing experiences, although those are great, but just having different types of music on, and also answering the curiosity if you can. So if your child says, "Oh, what's that?" Sort of saying, "Oh, this is reggae," or "This is salsa music," and sort of trying to feed the curiosity. And it might be they turn around and say, "Oh, actually, I don't like that," but certainly that kind of exposure to as much as possible, because as we all know, young people's brains are like sponges and they can kind of absorb a huge amount.
And it's impressive if a child turns around and says, "I don't like that." I think that's quite a good decision in some ways. Absolutely. In that they're thinking about it, and that's a really important thing. I would totally agree with all of those points. And I think from a double bass player point of view, definitely being part of ensembles, jazz bands, big bands, Dixieland bands, orchestra, string ensembles, string groups.
Hello, Galaxy again.
Hello, Galaxy. Okay,
sorry,
so this is third time lucky that we're back on.
Apologies for the technical difficulties. But yeah, just I know we kind of know we've finished off there, but yeah, just that being versatile, and the bass really does. The point for that was that it really lends itself to that, so it can be a really good thing to do.
I was watching something maybe a couple of years ago. I think it was Birmingham Conservatoire folk group, and they were the most amazing people to watch. And anyone online, Facebook, whatever, look it up and Google it. They're having the most amount of fun. And I think that's what it is. If you get involved with something like that, folk, orchestra, and you're having a great time, then you know, that's exactly the way into different types of music, just to get involved and have a go.
Totally.
I think they're playing in Birmingham New Street Station or something, and they're just having the best time. So look
Yeah,
that
and
up.
like just to quickly, sorry, Alice, just to pick up on something you said there that I know Joe Bradley is like so keen on as well, is that sometimes it requires a wee step out of your comfort zone to do that, like, and to you might think, oh, I've got no experience doing this, and then all of a sudden you're in this new musical experience. It can be nerve wracking, it can be terrifying, but jumping into that deep end is often one of the best things you can do, and you'll find that most musicians are really nice people and will be welcoming and will offer their hand and will offer you guidance and help you in that new musical world.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so with that in mind, orchestras, ensembles, and groups. How important are they? What groups are available? I mean, obviously, the virtual sessions are available for stringies, and all others will have been for the past month, and that's been pretty epic. But there are loads, aren't there? I mean, we could just list them off, I suppose. But what's your favourite orchestra? That's hard, isn't it?
Favorite orchestra, as in for young people or for in the
Either,
world?
either. For
um,
young people,
Well, I
we'd
mean,
like to.
I might be slightly biased because I live north of the border, but my years at National Youth Orchestra Scotland were very formative and very enjoyable, and I learned a huge amount about playing. In fact, I think May is watching this, and May was one of my tutors when I was at National Youth Orchestra, and she was like such a, and she's gonna get so embarrassed and tell me to be quiet, but she was such an inspiration, and like I think it was one of my first ever courses, and I was terrified. Like I said, it's quite a nerve wracking thing, and but you know, like I said, musicians are for the most part nice people, and May was really welcoming and helped me, and you know, and that made it a really enjoyable and good experience. What about you, Alice? What's your favorite orchestra?
It's the Hello Galaxy Orchestra and the Benedetti Session orchestras. But also, I also have had, I'm remembering back from when I was doing sort of youth orchestra stuff, and when they got bass tutors in, and you just like a sponge when you're a kid, just taking all these amazing bits of information and amazing stories about, you know, where they'd been on tour or something. You're like, oh my god, I could do that, you know. And
Yeah.
it's just another reason why kids should join all these ensembles so early on and get involved, because then you meet people and you hear about these things that you could do. You know, you could go abroad, you know, well, obviously not right now, but when everything goes back to normal, you can go abroad on tours, and it's the best thing ever. So, you know.
Yeah, and especially as a bass player, because we are quite a rare breed, would you say? Would you agree with that?
Specialist breed, yes.
Yes, there's not as many of us as you know, violins, violas, and cellos, and what you may discover as you start attending more courses and more youth orchestra projects and more other music groups is they've been longing for a bass player to turn up, and then so yeah, as we were saying, Alice,
and that was such a great joke there, Stuart.
yes, I know, and everyone missed it. What a shame.
It seems like so many people on Facebook are watching us right now that you're just crashing us down every 10 minutes. So really sorry, everybody. Just stick with us if you can.
Yeah, everyone just wants to know about the bass. That's the thing.
It's all about this. So we were talking about orchestras, ensembles, and how brilliant they are, and you should all join them. If you're any musician, just do it. And if you don't think there's anything right for you out there, orchestras or otherwise, then you can always, as we're finding now, record yourself and then play a duet with yourself, or get in touch with your next door neighbour and do a duet, and start small maybe and build it up. I put some questions out to my mum actually, and some other past pupil parents, and a couple of things that came up, concerns, especially about bass players, are often the logistics. And my mum wasn't that worried, because when I started the double bass, I played on a really small instrument. Well, not, it was I think I played on a half size to start off, so it wasn't actually as big as a full size double bass. It wasn't that daunting, and I kind of just got on with it. She said that the one thing that is scary is knowing that we can, especially freelancers, carry it around on the train and things. Have you ever had that? Have you ever been worried about that, Stuart?
Yeah, I think my parents were quite, so my sisters were all, I have 3 older sisters, and they were all already playing the violin, viola, and cello, hilariously. And I started on the violin as a wee bit of, don't tell anyone, but I know. But I was lucky enough to get one of the York mini basses, and I didn't really get a huge amount of choice. I was sort of turned up at school and was given one. I don't know what that says with my violin playing, but I got given a bass and a stool, and it really is quite a lot because, you know, even just that, like I just said, you have a bass, and for the most part, people sit down as well, so you have to take your own stool with you, and then it's all of a sudden both hands are full, and if you're a little person, then it's very unlikely you have the strength to be able to manage your bass and your stool at the same time. And then if you're going to a music project, you need to take a music stand, all of a sudden the things start building up. And I know for parents, most parents, the immediate worry is how on earth are we going to transport it to the car? I must say, a little disclaimer, I used to drive a Fiat Punto and my bass went in that. And, you know, if you get the back seats down and you get it between, you know, the driver's seat and the passenger seat, then it's usually no bother at all.
I mean, I think that's a double bass thing as well, because my first car was a Peugeot 205, which is also a 3-door hatchback. I guess the important thing is that they need to be hatchbacks.
Yes.
Saloons are not our friends. But yeah, and then Renault Clio for years, and tiny cars, and I've got loads of stories of people who would drive a Mini and still fit in a double bass and things. So you can definitely make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's like any instrument, you know, obviously I sometimes get a wee bit jealous of kind of, you know, violinists who can put their instrument on their back, or, you know, put it in the luggage rack on the train and stuff. And it can be, there's no denying it, that it can be a hassle, and that there will be train journeys where you have to stand with your instrument in the vestibule, or you'll be, you know, maybe getting in the way, but it's all part and parcel, and it makes for a much more exciting journey, in my opinion. So
yeah, and actually I quite enjoy it. I quite
yes,
enjoy carrying it around sometimes.
absolutely.
Not in rush hour. I always avoid rush hour.
Yes.
But,
Alice, we've got a shout out to make.
oh yeah,
Is that okay if I kind of come in with these shout
absolutely,
out
because I'm not really looking at my Facebook.
So that's right. I've got it here. So we've got a shout out to 9-year-old bassist Jacob playing an 8th size double bass.
Yes,
right,
Jacob.
Hey Jacob, great to see you. And we also have a question, Alice.
Great, go for it.
It doesn't say who it's from, but the question is: how do you strike a balance between perfecting a piece and not being too hard on yourself? And the person says that their child can't understand why we have to perfect pieces when making mistakes are supposed to be fine.
Yeah.
And okay. Hi everyone. Sorry again. Just in the middle of talking about this
Mistakes.
the idea of mistakes. And yeah, and like we said, there's a bit of a paradox, but it's really important to understand that when we're talking about mistakes being okay, we are talking about the learning process, and we are talking about making the mistake, thinking about what you did, thinking about what went wrong. Was it my bow? Was it my breath? Was it, you know, my pattern with my sticks or something? And understanding what went wrong and learning from that, and using that as a great opportunity to sort of think, okay, that's happening because I'm doing this, or that happened because I did this that time. I'm not going to do that this time, or I need to do something differently. And then it's part of that problem solving. Would you agree, Alice?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think if you think about a performance, you know, you're doing your solo recital in the Albert Hall, let's say, the Royal Albert Hall. You're in the middle of the stage. You've just played the most amazing piece, but you played one note wrong. And you come off and you go, that was a disaster, I played one note wrong. Not at all, because you absolutely went for it. You did a whole performance and you were taking risks by just going for it. You weren't going to stop for one note. And almost certainly in a performance like that, the audience wouldn't even notice. But then you also can take it away and go, actually, I could play that again and play the note correctly. And, you know, you just learn from those mistakes. But I think it's about the energy put in and the risk taking and stuff.
Yeah, totally.
So
great question.
Don't be hard on yourself as well. If you're struggling with something, then the best thing to do is to absolutely just pull it apart. Normally take it so slow. I was chatting earlier about working on an exercise which is fiendishly hard, and I ended up taking it to about the third of the tempo, and then I could play it right. And then I was like, that's great. And then I'll crank up the tempo, I can play it right still. Oh goodness. And you just build it up, and there's no point being hard on yourself. You just keep going and putting energy in to try and make it better, right? Yes.
Absolutely, and it's such a human thing to be hard on yourself, and everyone does it, and it is. It's just about finding your own process and finding your own way. And I know it's all the rage at the moment. Hashtag be kind. Well, the first person to be kind to is always yourself, and really not being too hard on yourself, and remembering that playing an instrument is, and this is the thing that we sometimes lose, is it's meant to be fun and it is meant to be enjoyable. And if you're in a kind of down a practice, black hole, then we can sometimes lose sight of that. But as Alice says, just taking a step back, get away from the instrument. If you're starting to beat yourself up, get away from the instrument. Go and do something you love doing. Go and read a book. Go for a jog. Go and bake something, because it's lockdown and everyone's baking. But yeah, it's really important to not, as soon as you feel yourself heading into that negative headspace, to take a step away and take a step back.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I was going to then ask about, sort of related to logistical things and carrying stuff around, is I had a quite good question about equipment, the setup, and what else was I put down there? Oh yeah, how to pay for it. Okay, so depending on what age, I guess, but Stuart, go for it. I mean, maybe what would you suggest for any age, for any instrument? It's quite a broad.
Absolutely, and that kind of, I think there's no hiding from the fact that musical instruments cost money, and usually cost a significant amount of money, especially double basses. Even the cheaper double basses are expensive pieces of equipment. I think never losing sight of the fact that there are many charitable trusts, usually who are very locally based. So looking around your local area for charitable trusts, and often people are looking to support things, especially if you're a parent with a child, or a teacher who has a young student who is looking for a new instrument. And that, I don't, in my experience, that sort of goes all the way from beginners right through to conservatoire level students, so people at music college, because I had plenty of friends at music college who were awarded a violin by a charitable trust, and maybe twice a year or 3 times a year they had to play a concert for the trust's founders and their friends. But that in itself is a great experience. And again, that kind of cost of beginner equipment is quite a significant payment. And looking for there are instrument hire schemes, and usually on a short-term basis they can be quite expensive. But I know a lot of music shops now are offering kind of longer-term leases of maybe 6 months or a year, where the payments are broken down, and it's actually a lot cheaper than just hiring day by day.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as you're growing up, as you're a small person, you start out on a small base, but you find, as double basses go, but you find that you'll move on to the bigger sizes fairly quickly.
Yeah.
So weighing up whether you buy a small instrument or rent one or borrow one, it may be more of an idea to borrow one when you're first starting out from a music service or a trust or a shop or whatever. And then, going forward, I mean, even now, actually, quite a few big orchestras in the UK and in Europe have their own sets of double basses, or at least a bass. So, and at the colleges as well, there are nice instruments that can be lent out. So it's nothing to really panic about at all, I wouldn't say. And there are so many trusts. I know when I got my double bass, I sent letters out to about 25 different groups of people asking for help, and they all came back and helped me, and it was possible. So the best thing to do, I think, is to Google, do a bit of research, and go from there, right? I mean,
absolutely,
anything's possible.
Yes,
there is a really good scheme. I think it's still available. Take It Away, I think it is. Again, just Google it, and they are good for younger, possibly smaller priced instruments.
And websites like the Musicians Union and ISM always have lots and lots of lists of places to find, and the Musicians Benevolent Fund or Help Musicians UK, they're really good places to go as well.
Yes.
Alice, we've had another question.
Oh, yeah.
So this question is, are there any benefits of beginning on the bass rather than converting from cello to bass?
Well, probably, but I don't think there's a problem either way. If you want to learn, then you go for it. I don't think there's a problem. I mean, I was one of these bass players that was a flute player and went to double bass. That's quite a common thing. There are going to be people, bass players, nodding, going, yeah, I play flute too. That's weirdly a common thing. And I transferred to double bass. So I don't know about cello to double bass, but if you want to swap over or give it a go or do them at the same time, then have fun, then go for it.
From a technical point of view, there's maybe a couple of things, but certainly from a right-hand point of view, bowing-wise, all the principles are pretty much identical, especially at beginner level. So that kind of stuff converts really well. I would certainly wouldn't spend like a huge amount of time on cello and then move to bass. So that might be quite confusing in terms of the intervals between the strings being different and the kind of actual physical hand shape and things being different. But certainly, I guess a benefit would be just more familiarity with the instrument and what. One difference is maybe that it takes a bit more physical strength to make a sound on a bass, and making a kind of good sound on a bass, I would maybe say. So a benefit would maybe be being used to that from an early age. But as Alice says, starting on any instrument and then moving to bass, we would always encourage. We're trying to steal as many bass players as we can in this world.
Convert them to the good side. Yeah. That's a nice question, actually, because I'm sure there are cellists out there thinking that cello is definitely, not as great as the double bass. No, I can't say that because the cello is great and there are some fabulous cellists. But...
Got to stay with our team lower strings, but they're not quite as good as team bass, but almost.
Okay, so another big question is roots of education. So, and this could be from a beginner wanting to do extra stuff, going all the way up. Do teenagers go to music school or normal school, and then even further up, music college, university, a totally different subject? What do you reckon, Stuart?
Well, I mean, there are so many varying options available to this, whether it's school music lessons versus private lessons, and then going to a music specialist school, as you said, versus going to a normal school. Again, the wonderful thing about music, and this is a very cheesy thing to say, but I think it's cheesy and true for a reason, is that everyone's like kind of musical journey is different, and you have to find what works well for you. I look at like some of my friends who I work with and I love working with, and whether that's playing or teaching, and everyone has their different way that they went on their musical educational journey. Like I had council lessons in Ayrshire in Scotland, big up, and then I didn't go to specialist music school. I didn't go to a junior department of the music college in Glasgow, and I finally switched from council lessons to private lessons for about 3 months for my last just before my auditions. But that was just so I could have an hour rather than half an hour of a lesson, because it wouldn't work like that at the school. So and what I found was that actually it's just finding the way of making it work for you. And I have, like I said, tons of friends who did, they were in specialist music education from primary school and went right through the other way. And they, there are huge benefits to every, side of doing that.
Yeah, definitely. I would say probably as you get older, so as you get older, to try having consultation lessons. So if you are thinking about something like maybe even a junior department or music school and conservatoire and universities especially, getting in touch with the teachers that they have on their books and going for a lesson. And normally they can be free consultation lessons, and seeing if you get along with them, because the worst thing would be to get to somewhere and you don't actually like them. That would be awful. So do try, and also go and visit places. So when I was looking at universities and conservatoires and weighing up, should I do a university course or should I do music just flat out at a conservatoire, I went and visited, I can't remember the university, I think it might have been Northampton, and I looked around the place, the campus, and it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me at all. It was quite enclosed, and I suddenly decided that London was the place for me. But I know loads of kids who go to junior departments or have lessons or live in London or a similar city that just want to get out and have like the slightly smaller world, more contained world maybe of a university. So go around to all these places, make notes on what you liked about it and what you didn't like about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like getting in if you can as well. What I found really useful. I went to the Northern in Manchester, and it just so happened there were two bass players from Aberdeen called. I'm going to give them a shout out. Vary Simpson, who I'm sure you'll know, Alice, and the other one was called Kirsty Wilson. She actually now lives in Australia with her wee twins. They're very cute. But they were both these Aberdonian bass players, and what was great was I got their email address, I think from my auntie who also lived in Aberdeen, and I sort of just randomly out of the blue emailed them and was like, hello, what's it like in Manchester? And I got this amazing, I've actually ended up phoning Vary, and she gave me all this info. She told me about the different teachers available. She told me that key bit of advice you just said about getting a consultation lesson, making sure you go to the open day, see what it's like. And I had exactly the same experience like you said. You walk into some places and you think, oh, I don't know if I like it here. And then there's other places you walk in and the buzz and the feel is just, it matches your personality. It matches you as a person. And I'll just, if you don't mind, Alice, if I add just one more thing about that, is about if you have a child and that is nearing that age and that decision and they're still not sure what to do, don't panic and don't worry, because it can take just a visit or an open day in 5th year or 6th year for them to make that decision and to reach that decision. And I think what I really liked about the way that my parents handled it was that they didn't put any pressure. And even when we were sat in the Royal Northern Refectory at the open day, my mum, turned to me and said, you don't even have to, to do a music college. I know we're visiting all these music colleges, but don't feel the pressure. And it lifted a huge amount of weight off my shoulders, because up until then, I'd been really in my head thinking, oh, well, we're visiting all these places, and then, maybe that means I need to go and do this, and I need to, do this as a career. And actually, my mum saying that and lifting that pressure, and then me sort of taking a step back and thinking about it was super important. And
yeah, absolutely. My mum was kind of similar, actually. I remember going for an audition in Birmingham to go to the conservatoire there. I didn't actually end up going there, although Birmingham is really cool and everything's really kicking off there now. But I remember going there, and as we got to the station, with bass and everything, it'd been quite a long journey. Got to the audition and I'd left my stool on the platform, and I was like, this is like the biggest disaster. This is Armageddon in Birmingham New Street. My mum was just like, oh, don't worry, I'll just go back and get it. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. And I'm pretty sure she wasn't that calm about it either, but she just went off, reappeared with this stool, because of course it was beaten up, not really a double bass stool. I think it was like an ironing stool or something. So of course no one took it, It was brilliant. But try all these places out. I think sometimes we could look at music schools. So there are a few really specialist music schools. They can seem a bit intense, but I would also venture out and look around them, because they can also be amazing
Absolutely.
places.
And Alice, I've got a question for you.
Oh yeah.
Is your mum Margaret?
Margaret Kent.
We have a question from Margaret Kent.
Oh gosh.
And that's a very, very good question.
Is it? Okay.
The question is, what role do youth orchestras play in giving basses experience in their playing? And if you don't mind, I'll kick off with this one and say that it was life-changing for me going to youth orchestra, and the reason for that is sort of when you are, especially as a beginner, and you're playing, the bass is not always, I mean, it is now for me the most satisfying, but when you're a beginner, it can be quite hard to get used to playing melodies at that pitch and that low, and you're not always playing. A lot of the best pieces for bass for developing your technique are not always the most tuneful pieces, but what you get when you go and suddenly play, I still remember the first National Children's Orchestra Scotland rehearsal, and sitting in a section of 10 double basses and hearing that sound. I mean, I'm sure it was perfectly in tune, obviously, but kind of hearing that sound and being that collective part is was like I said, and I don't think I'm overstating it by saying life changing. It sort of kind of it made me set up and go, wow, I didn't realize I could do this as well. And kind of, you know, from playing on your own, the bass can be a little bit unsatisfying when you're younger, but then when you suddenly are in a row of 10 basses and playing, I learned some of my, you know, most valuable double bass playing tips, like you said, Alice, from tutors in sectionals, them telling you stories about things, and then actually playing, like I remember like National Youth Orchestra Scotland, I was so lucky. Like, I know this isn't how it works as much anymore, but like I was so lucky I got to go and play in like the Concertgebouw in Berlin Concert House, playing like Schoss 10 with these, I know, like these incredible. And I think about the bass players now that were in that section, and like half of them have jobs in orchestras now, and it was so great from my own perspective. I'm sure you have a similar perspective.
Do you those 10 bass players that were there? Do you still mates with them? Are they still playing?
Yeah. So let me think. Oh, good goodness, that's. I know that. Shout out to Aileen, Marshall in Glasgow, Andrew Robb, who is a fantastic jazz bass player in Edinburgh. Who else was in that section? Scott Matheson was in that section, I think, and he's now fantastic bass teacher up in Aberdeen. Yeah,
so cool,
a lot
isn't
of them.
It?
Chris Sargent, who is like in Scottish Ballet, I'm sure you know Chris. Like, you know, all these kind of like incredible bass players are now still working as musicians and as educators and as players and everything. It's just, yeah,
it's really cool, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same for me. I was part of the Brighton Youth Orchestra, massive, and they were the best. They are the best.
Shout out Dave FC.
They're such a great bunch down there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I learned so much. We do crazy difficult repertoire as well. That's probably a thing that still happens. But we, you know, Andy Sherwood, who's still around, he'd suddenly, you know, be like, right, we're going to do Schoss 9 today, Shostakovich 9 for Christmas, and then we're all like, and if you come across the bass part for that, you're like, what? They've made a mistake in my part. It's not in bass clef for like a whole movement, so I can't do it. And then suddenly you're like, oh no, that's okay, and you're in the deep end going for it, and it's so much fun because everyone's just banging away at this music, and it's great. And that was really good. And I remember really vividly going up to London from Brighton on the train to do Music for Youth, I think it was, like a million years ago. And we were going to get on a bus, and I'd never gotten on a bus with a bass, on a double-decker London bus. And I was like, I can't do this. We can't do this. And I just remember the whole string ensemble that I was with just going, no, come on. And we all just piled on, and it was like, oh no, this is absolutely fine. Yeah, it's fine. And stuff like that you learn, and you get to go on holidays essentially with your mates, don't you? If you go off on tour to Venice or whatever, you know. And it's
bass life experience, hashtag bass life. You need all these little things of jumping on a bus with the bass, or having to, you know, fit on the corner of a stage, and you know you've got a 10-foot drop into the audience beside you, and you're trying to play Schoss 9 but you're only grade 4 and stuff like that. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Oh man, hilarious, really. But yeah, really good. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything that we wanted to cover. Have we got any more questions?
I do. I've got one more from Corinne. Sorry. And what she said is that your parents sound very supportive, and then she's asked, did they push you to practice when you were little? And it's funny because that question arrived, you know, about 30 seconds ago, and I've been trying to cast my mind back to.
I don't need to cast my mind back. I think if my mum really pushed me to practice, I would have absolutely screamed the town down. But she did also encourage me,
Yeah, I think it was.
Look at that. Yeah, okay, I'll look at that. Yeah, it's this kind of balance, isn't there? You push someone too hard and they just push. But at the same time, a bit of support and encouragement, very welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think it is that they certainly said to me, "Oh, it would be good if you went and did your practice now," or they said you should go and
good line.
that direction. But they would never, like you say, it's like that thing of if you push against one hand, your other hand naturally resists back and resists harder. Sorry to laugh, Alice. Your mum has just apparently on Facebook chat just said that no, she didn't. So stitched you up massively. But yeah, I think now, and I feel as a society again to get heavy. We're a lot better at that now, and we're there's a lot more research in that kind of area of, getting the best out of whether it's young people or old people, kind of trying to find strategies for getting the best out of people. And for practice, I think I'm going to say this is quite a bit controversial, but I think when I was young, I wasn't really sure how to practice.
And oh my God, no idea.
Exactly. And my practice, and one of my things that I always do with when learning with people is to try and impart that wisdom about how to practice and to go through the exercises that are, and I think that's a really important thing is if you're a parent or a teacher with a student, to really have that communication with the student, with your child, about asking them, making sure that they understand what they're trying to achieve with their practice, how to go about that, different strategies. And if they're not sure, then, having the conversation with the teacher, talking it through, kind of asking the teacher to go through it with the young person can be, because that is the key, like, is finding how to make practice work for you, whether it's having a super I remember I got this, like, for one audition I was practicing for, I adopted this new, like, what seemed to me completely absurd practice technique, which was basically 3 minutes per thing. So I'd spend 3 minutes on an excerpt and then 3 minutes on like 2 bars of a piece or something. I just kept on doing that, timer on, every 3 minutes you change to something new. Excuse me. And actually my kind of level of playing in preparation for that audition went like this. Yeah. And it blew my mind because I'd always sort of, I'd got into my routine, and it just kind of shows that you should always be experimenting and trying new things with your practice. It might be that your best practice is you do 5 really intense minutes, then you go and read a book for 20 minutes, then you do 5 really intense minutes. And the old cliches are cliches because they're true, that quantity over quality, and not pushing, because what you often find is if you don't push, then the young person will go and pick up their instrument themselves and will, I think there's a difference between pushing and just lighting that curiosity. That's the key, is lighting that little spark of curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I did have a practice chart when I was little, actually. Remember that? For my flute lessons, I must have really struggled to practice it. Obviously, wasn't
the old tin whistle.
But yeah, I would fill in. I did 2 minutes today. Those 2 minutes, I'm going to put them in my box. But that could be quite a nice strategy anyway, so you build it up.
Absolutely.
But yeah, there we are. Good chat, Stuart Wilson.
Alice
nice
Kent.
One.
I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and join you.
It's good to see you, and it's good to see everyone. Not really, but we can't see you. But so thanks everyone for joining us, and you helped crash Facebook. You crashed the world. Our viewers crashed the galaxy.
We're like Jennifer Aniston when she joined Instagram and brought Instagram down. That's just basically what we're like.
That's what we did, and we did it 3 times in a row before we really got going. I mean, and I'm not surprised.
Me neither. I mean, it's just, look at the backgrounds as well, it's what they're
Yeah, my base is awkward. Okay, so if there are no more questions,
I don't think
I would just double check, but no. So I would just say to everyone, immerse yourself and listen and watch music, and when we can all get back out in the real world and have a lovely time, go to concerts, go to gigs, go and have a lovely time, go and take part in anything, give it a go. And if you love it, then that's brilliant, and keep going. I was going to do share my screen of stuff, but I'm just going to put some clips of fun double bassy stuff on the blurb when this goes recorded on the Benedetti Foundation page. So we'll do that. Yes, and I really hope that everyone tunes in on Sunday for this basically party of a month's work being whoosh together. And watch it. I think it's Sunday at 4 or something
4
like
p.m.
that.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
And I think there's fun stuff all weekend. So Saturday, Sunday, get involved, join in, and yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and enjoy it. Good to see you, Stuart. Hopefully I'll see you soon.
Alice, absolutely. And goodbye, Galaxy.